So, have you ever looked at a developing country and thought, how did they just become a global superpower practically overnight? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking the MPAQ Institute's incredibly fascinating framework on national development. We're going to dive deep into how a country can completely transform its global standing by simply shifting its focus away from what's buried in the ground to what's right there in the mind. Let's get into it.
Right off the bat, we've got to ask this big question. What actually makes a nation powerful in the 21st century? Because honestly, this challenges basically everything we've traditionally assumed about strength. For centuries, we measured a country's muscle by its natural resources, its massive labor force, or its physical borders. But the MPPK IGQ Institute, which is a collective of 31 leading professors and experts, they argue we need to look way beyond those physical metrics. We are in an era where the true currency of power is entirely invisible. Here is the absolute crucial point. A country that relies solely on resources or cheap labor is severely limiting its own potential. I mean, you can only dig up so much coal, right? And cheap labor, well, that eventually becomes expensive as a nation develops. That old model just keeps a country dependent. The new model, on the other hand, is all about mastering intellectual property, or IP. When a nation creates and exports knowledge, digital ecosystems, and real innovation, it unlocks this boundless, sustainable global power. Think about nations with practically zero natural resources that are still incredibly wealthy just because of their tech and patents. That is the new model in action.
To truly wrap our heads around this profound shift, we're going to map out the 6 parts of this Tam Tài philosophy today. We'll be looking at the new power of knowledge, the 3-pillar foundation, heaven, which is leadership vision, earth, the enterprise engine, human, the creative masses, and finally, we'll pull it all together with the intellectual flywheel.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the new power of knowledge.
Okay, so picture a ladder of evolution for a country's value. Down at the very bottom, you have your basic natural resources and raw labor. But as you climb, you hit industrial manufacturing, then basic technology. But the ultimate goal? That's all the way on the right. The further right we move into a true knowledge economy, intellectual property, and creative ecosystems, the higher a country's autonomy and global worth becomes. At that point, you aren't just making things anymore, you are literally inventing the concepts that the rest of the world relies on.
Moving right along, let's hit part 2, the 3-pillar foundation. Now, before we even touch on the mechanics of government policies or corporate strategy, we absolutely have to talk about the human element. The Institute breaks this down into 3 core pillars. First up is elevating intellect, which is all about fostering independent, critical thinking across the entire population. Second is awakening spirit, because let's face it, knowledge is completely useless without the drive to actually use it. This is about turning that awareness into bold action. And third, enhancing welfare. Intellect is the foundation, spirit is the driving force, but the people's actual everyday livelihood is the ultimate measuring stick for any national strategy. If the intellectual property doesn't eventually improve the lives of everyday citizens, well, the system has failed. Next up is part 3, heaven, which focuses on leadership vision. Okay, when I say intellectual property, you're probably picturing a tech patent or a line of software code, right? Well, scratch that. At this highest level, what they call the heaven level, IP is not just a patent, it's the overarching strategic blueprint and legal framework created by national leaders. We're talking about things like data governance laws, AI strategies, and national development models. It is the absolute highest form of strategic thinking that dictates exactly where the country's heading. Think of this layer as the national compass. Now, it doesn't necessarily manufacture products itself. You're never going to see a government policy sitting on a retail shelf. But what it does do is pave the road for millions of innovations to safely and legally emerge. If a country has abundant resources but lacks this strategic IP, it's just going to end up selling off its raw materials to the lowest bidder. Without this heaven layer, a nation might have brilliant individuals, sure, but their efforts would be totally disconnected and chaotic. It's the compass ensuring the whole country grows with a unique, unified identity. That brings us to part 4, earth, focusing on the enterprise engine.
So if heaven is the massive strategic blueprint, earth is where things get real. Here, enterprises and businesses act as the powerful engine. They take those lofty blueprints from leadership and turn them into competitive market realities. This is exactly where scientific discoveries and philosophical ideas get funded, tested, packaged, and literally transformed into commercial products, brand equity, and real financial capital. And for any business leaders tuning in, this is absolutely crucial. Your future value isn't going to be measured by how many physical factories or warehouses you own, but by the invisible, highly valuable IP assets you control.
The goal for a developing nation's businesses is a massive shift. Stop simply assembling parts for other global companies and start owning the patents, the software, and the business ecosystems yourselves. Earth is the layer that takes raw intellect and turns it into an undeniable economic force. All right, now we get to the core of it all with Part 5, Human, which explores the creative masses. Innovation is literally everywhere. Intellectual property isn't just for guys in white lab coats. A farmer perfecting a new agricultural method holds a piece of intellectual property that is just as vital to the nation as a big tech CEO's algorithm. An artisan with unique cultural knowledge, a teacher with a new educational method, or even a student coding the next big app in their messy dorm room. This is all decentralized grassroots innovation.
The big takeaway here? You, yes, you watching this, are an active participant in this ecosystem. The deep philosophy here isn't just that the state and businesses create things for the people to passively consume. No way. The idea is that the people are co-creators. You are the spark, generating the very data, the unique needs, and the localized grassroots solutions that the entire country relies on to grow. Finally, let's pull all these concepts together in Part 6, the intellectual flywheel.
Now watch how this all connects into one massive continuous loop. It starts top-down, leaders set the laws and vision. Then, businesses use those laws to build technology and create jobs. Those innovations filter down to empower the public. But it doesn't just stop there. The flywheel then spins bottom up. The practical challenges, the data, and the grassroots innovations of everyday citizens bubble right back up to inform the leaders, helping them adjust and create the next generation of national strategy. That feedback loop right there, that's the secret sauce. That is what prevents laws from becoming outdated and makes a nation truly self-sustaining in its innovation.
This summary perfectly maps out the exact life cycle of this knowledge. Look at how it flows. Up at the heaven layer, you have the raw idea, the philosophy, and the research. But an idea alone just isn't enough, right? So it moves to the earth layer where it becomes an asset. It gets legally protected, patented, and built. Finally, it reaches the human layer where it becomes actual value. It creates livelihoods, solves real-world problems, and generates revenue. Idea to asset to value. It's a brilliant progression.
But let's be real. Making this massive, complex flywheel actually spin takes some serious coordination. And sitting right at the intersection of philosophy, science, and policy, institutes like MPPAQ act as that vital bridge. Their experts function as these knowledge nuclei, ensuring that high-level academic research doesn't just collect dust in some library somewhere, but actually translates into actionable capabilities for the state, for businesses, and for the entire community.
And that brings us to this incredibly powerful vision, invented in Vietnam, owned by Vietnam, shared with the world. This is the ultimate climax of the Tam Tài philosophy. It's about stepping far beyond simply being the world's factory floor or just a place where things are made in Vietnam. The ultimate aspiration here is to become a sovereign creator of global knowledge, where groundbreaking ideas are invented locally, owned locally, but have the immense power to be shared and utilized by the entire world. I want to leave you with a final thought to reflect on regarding your own role as a creator within this massive ecosystem. Whether you're a policymaker, an entrepreneur, or an everyday citizen, your ideas are the fuel. If national power is no longer just buried in the ground, but literally living in our minds, what intellectual property are you going to create tomorrow to keep this flywheel spinning? I really hope this explainer has completely reshaped how you view the future of national intelligence and your own part in it. Thanks for hanging out and learning with us today.